Andrew Mackinlay.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I am one of those who voted for the conflict, and I've told the House before that I shall deeply regret this until the day I die. I believe that I was hoodwinked. I think my judgments were unsound. I remember at the time the crisis which we all had, examining a just war, looking into what Thomas Aquinas said, trying to understand the international law. But the background of it was that a British Prime Minister came to this House and told us that there was an immediate and serious threat. And certainly that influenced me. It's on another occasion I can amplify upon that. But this House and this nation was misled, and I'm angry about having been so fooled and how bounced into this. And therefore, when one looks at the motion before us tonight, put by the official opposition, I'm just bewildered how anybody can vote against it. It sums up what must be done, that there should be an agreed inquiry, independent, and that there should be a resolution of this House of Commons to reaffirm its terms of conditions, terms of appointment and its membership. And particularly at a time when the Prime Minister keeps going on about rejuvenating Parliament, constitutional reform, this is one of the tests, and I'm going to refer to another one in a moment, why he should be embracing this motion. And I have to say that when one looks at the amendment proposed by the government, it makes me very, very angry indeed. Throughout the past week, since last Wednesday, when I cautioned the Prime Minister at question time that I wanted to know whether or not people were going to be giving evidence under the oath, there's been really no great response or interest either by many members of Parliament and by the press until in the past few hours. And even some very good members of Parliament on all sides still haven't seemed to understand that the reality is that nobody can give evidence under oath. Nobody, because it's not a statutory inquiry. And for the government to put in words like consult party leaders on the scope for taking evidence under oath, I know, and the Prime Minister knows, that this is a complete nonsense. The only way you could give evidence under oath is if there was a swift act of Parliament to facilitate this extraordinary one-off inquiry. And I think I'm the only person in the House, of course, who attended Hutton. I gave evidence at Hutton, but none of the evidence at Hutton was under oath at all, and I refer to that again in a moment. Now, both Prime Minister Blair and the current Prime Minister try and pray in aid, and I think I'm quoting them. They sort of said, oh, there's been numerous inquiries on this. There was the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, there was Butler, and there was Hutton. Well, not one single one of those so-called inquiries was under oath. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, I can tell you to extract the truth was like extracting teeth from a whale. There was every obstruction put in our way. There were redactions in the reports which have been referred to earlier. Butler was behind closed doors. We don't know actually really what evidence it did receive. It only could have to rely on their report. There was clearly no evidence given under oath. And I've already told the House that Hutton was an informal, non-statutory inquiry, albeit headed by a distinguished judge. And no evidence was given under oath. Our witness statements are under the 30-year rule. My little humble witness statement won't be seen for 30 years, nor will the Defence Secretary, Jeff Hoon at that time, nor the Prime Minister at that time, nor all the other people in the Security Intelligence Services. None of their witness statements will see light of day, unless, of course, this new inquiry was independent and was appointed under the Tribunal and Inquiries legislation. But, of course, the establishment daren't do that because all the documents which were seen by Hutton, by Butler and the Foreign Affairs Select Committee would then be out in the open as documents before an independent inquiry. We know that there's been extensive dissembling, untruths told by a number of parties and agencies since the Iraq War and before, and we need to expose them and find out what was the motive for the dissembling, the misleading, and downright lies in some cases. Now, over the past few days, wits have come to me saying, oh, we don't want a Savile-type inquiry. You know, it went on a long time, lasted a lot of money. Well, actually, I don't want a Savile-type inquiry, and I'm not advocating one, and it's not even necessary. But actually, Savile was related to one very traumatic and very heart-rending incident. But in terms of the volume and the deceit and so on, the Iraq War is much bigger than the awful events of Londonderry quarter of a century ago, and I'm not minimising what happened in Londonderry, but and so we certainly want, and Saville was a judicial inquiry where people had to give evidence under oath. The Lawrence inquiry was where people had to give under oath. And if I may go back in history, Winston Churchill gave evidence under oath at the Gallipoli inquiry, which is actually, although it's a long time ago, it's really what is kind of required now today to deal with this. Now, why am I so upset that the government try and spin this yarn that somehow there can be evidence under, I think they use the word, an equivalent of an oath? It can't be done. They know it, and if I'm wrong, I demand that the minister tells me where I'm wrong when he gets up and explains why I'm wrong. The fact that the oath not only makes people tell the truth, it protects those people who are being leaned upon by superiors and by other agencies. History would be different, actually, if evidence had been given under oath at the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and, I believe, at Hutton. Madam Deputy Speaker, I regret to say this, the problem is the Prime Minister. The fact is he doesn't understand that he doesn't understand. He comes along last week and announces this inquiry, hands it down like tablets of stone, basically saying, we're the government, so we decide. And it simply will not do. And anyway, things have moved on since last week. We were told it was a Frank-style inquiry. I think, quite wrongly, that would be the nature of the inquiry for the reasons which I've tried to explain to the House. But actually, it's now mutated into something completely different. It's mutated because the Prime Minister downwards with his advisers is panicking. So he's written to Chilcot and sort of said, well, see what you can do about having some sessions in public. And this phrase which they are using, that there will be some equivalent to the oath. There is no equivalent to the oath. Actually, more value will be the wolf cub's promise than what they're proposing. That's the fact. There is no such equivalent as the oath, and the Prime Minister knows it. And if the Minister here, sitting here, thinks I'm wrong, I repeat again, will he explain when he gets up to the dispatch box what this equivalent is, which will have the force of law and the sanction, and the criminal sanctions if it were ever to be abrogated? I've said the Prime Minister doesn't understand it, doesn't understand. This isn't a test of whether or not all this stuff he's been saying about rejuvenating Parliament, almost putting the blame on the rest of us for bringing Parliament to disrepute. It's whether or not he's prepared to acknowledge that this Parliament has a right to decide the nature of the inquiry into why and how it was misled on the Iraq War. I'm buttressed in my arguments by not only those many people who I think the Prime Minister relied upon to say, what a good idea, Frank's type inquiry. Well, one after another over the past 7 days, they've said this is nonsense. Senior civil servants, members of the judiciary, and General Mike Jackson. I saw him a few nights ago on Newsnight saying, evidence must be given under oath. I gave a cheer because they can't hide behind the fact that some of these people who were in the military, who've seen the conflict, who've seen the evidence, knew what was going on. They say this must be an independent inquiry, evidence given under oath. Why doesn't the Minister understand that, and his boss, the Prime Minister? I say to him now that it's time he went out behind the chair, phoned the Prime Minister, and told him to accept this motion tonight. If he doesn't do so, he may win the vote, but I'm not certain of it. But he will have lost the debate, and the arguments for an independent inquiry will go on and on and on until one is conceded. Yeah.